Hey there. Are you tired of waiting for the next episode of It's Probably Not Aliens? Well, we've got some good news for you. On Nebula, our streaming service, you can get access to all our episodes a week early. That's right, you'll never have to wait again to hear Scott and I debunk the latest ancient astronaut theory or get a movie fact wrong. But that's not all. Nebula is home to dozens of content creators we know you like, so you can find all your favorites in one place. Plus, we post content on there that you won't find anywhere else. And the best part? By signing up for Nebula at nebula.tv/probablyNotAliens, you're directly supporting the show and both of us. So don't wait any longer. Join Nebula today and listen to the next episode right after this one.
So you wanted to open with an apology?
Yes, I have written a formal statement, and I did not want you to see it because I think that it's important. I think it's just important. I'm just gonna kind of get into it.
Yeah. Please, you have the floor.
We need a preface. The next thing. So, dear friends from the country of Germany, as the host of the podcast, It's Probably Not Aliens, I, Tristan Johnson, wish to extend my sincerest apologies for the less than accurate representation of your beautiful language and culture I can and will be committing with glee in our upcoming episodes.
Okay.
We are embarking on a journey to cover an Ancient Aliens episode focused entirely on your country. And I must confess, my German pronunciation will not be up to RDR standards. I have always held a deep admiration for German culture. For instance, I've always been in awe of Germany's incredible contribution to global entertainment, particularly the invention of the game Dance Dance Revolution, which they created in 1949.
That's awesome.
What a time to be alive that must have been. Your innovative spirit never ceases to amaze me. Speaking of innovation, the German love of complex board games and simulation video games is something I deeply respect. The dedication to perfecting leisure through more work is a concept only the brilliant German mind could cherish. I also must express my profound respect for Germany's musical maestros, Johann Strauss, Wolfgang Mozart, and the legendary DJ Funky Beats have all
equally important,
have all in my mind played pivotal roles in shaping the symphony of German culture. Their music transcends time and is part of the greatness of Germany's contribution to our global tapestry. I must also pay homage to the legendary German leader Paul der Octopus. His leadership during a hard time for your people left the world in awe in your struggle against the Brazilians. To finish, I want to share a quote from a German poem that I believe encapsulates the deep passion, humility, and beautiful soul of your people. Disco pogo, ding-a-ling-a-ling, ding-a-ling-a-ling, Ali Atzen sing. This profound verse speaks volumes about the joy, love, and the essence of German culture, being relaxed, carefree, fun, easygoing, and passionate. In conclusion, I hope you accept this apology with the same grace that characterizes your wonderful culture. I look forward to continuing to explore and celebrate the rich tapestry of world history and culture, albeit with a few mispronunciations along the way. If we meet in person, I hope we can still share a beer or one of your country's iconic Poffertjes. Herrliche Grüße, Tristan Johnson.
That's great. What a good... And look, if we do get stuff wrong and you are German, it's okay to be a little sour, crowd.
I also want to remind everybody of Mamma Mia's Law for the sake of this podcast.
Which is, in case people are new.
Yeah, Mamma Mia's Law is a rule that it is perfectly okay to make fun of and lean into stereotypes of any culture as long as that culture was involved in colonization at a point in its last few hundred years. And there are people on the African continent who have a experience of German colonization that I think that qualifies.
I think so. Well, what a great way to start this episode. We don't usually have
we don't usually have to start our episodes with formal apologies. But
we don't normally have to do that. This is also going to be fun because typically on episodes, this is a podcast. We'll talk about what it's about in a second. But typically when we dive into pseudo-history, pseudo-archaeology, it's like a fun twist where at the end or the middle or somewhere along the way we go, oh, by the way, Nazis. And we're like, oh, dang. And I'm like wondering, how quick are we going to get into Nazis this time?
The
my
answer
guess is pretty quick.
The answer here is immediately. So the long story short is that we have transitioned out of the episode on underground aliens, and we are currently entering into an episode that is merely titled Aliens and the Third Reich.
Great. So we're here.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. So this is a podcast, and we talk about Ancient Aliens, the TV show, Ancient Astronaut Theory, the concept, and pseudo-archaeology, pseudo-history, all that good stuff, pseudo-science even. And we look at those claims with a discerning eye of approximately a couple hours of just basic Google searching, if I could say that. I'm not the one who does it. I'm Scott Nicewander. I know nothing. I come into this pretty unprepared, except I do have a very exciting thing, which is that after months of after months of being out of commission, let's say, I finally have the soundboard's back up and running, baby.
Yeah, we're gonna have to issue a second formal apology for that.
But I'm not here alone. No. Who are you?
My name is Tristan Johnson, and I dedicated way too much time to writing that formal apology, including taking it to Kelly and being like, is this too much? Please tell me this is not too much. Can I go harder? Okay, that's too far.
What did she say? What did she say?
She was like, it's probably fine.
It's probably fine. That's what we do here on It's Probably Not Aliens.
The biggest thing that's weighing on our heads is that we have a couple neighbors who have started listening to the podcast who are from Germany. And I know that this is like specifically going to get to their ears.
Well, sorry about the sauerkraut joke. That's all I can apologize
It's all good.
I've not done anything else yet.
They are good-natured. It's all right.
All right. So we're talking about Aliens and the Third Reich. Great.
Yeah, that's so it's Oops All Nazis edition for the next little while, I think.
Now, this is why I wanted the soundboard up and running, because we've been having this little bit at the start of every episode where you go over the claim by doing what they do in the TV show, which is by saying millions of people around the world believe. And so I thought I could augment that with a little musical stinger, if that's okay.
Sure.
So let's get into the claim.
Yeah. Ooh. Millions of people immediately, millions of people around the world believe that what we know about the rapid advancement in technology during World War II of the Nazi regime has more to it than we like to think.
What?
So this is where we're kind of, this is the kind of general vibe of what we're going to be exploring over the next, as we cover this episode. Were the Nazis in possession of alien technology, or were they merely in possession of hyper-advanced sci-fi technology that we refuse to acknowledge and embrace because of reasons that nobody is ever very clear about?
So those are the only two explanations.
Yeah.
Is that it's either aliens or super highly advanced regular technology that we're keeping hidden. Shush, don't talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. That's sort of the two things we're going on. And today we're going to talk about the first sort of guy they go into when talking about it, which is a guy by the name of Viktor Schauberger. Viktor Schauberger.
Love going into a guy. Yeah.
Who might have invented a flying saucer for the Germans, as we know from all of the German flying saucers that we saw. And in the process, invented anti-gravity, possibly free energy.
Okay. Can I know I bring up like inconsistencies with Ancient Aliens and Ancient Astronaut Theory, but can we really say he invented anti-gravity if they also think that is how they moved the Moai statues?
Stop asking completely rational questions.
Okay, all right, my bad. I'm so sorry. I'm on board. I have to believe.
They needed a continuity. They needed a continuity editor on board for the script of the show.
This is the hardest episode. This is the hardest episode for me to like play my role on this show of like, all right, I'm on board because it is inherently Nazi shit. So I don't want to be on board.
Yeah.
But I'll play the part, I guess, a little bit. He made a flying saucer. He invented anti-gravity. Free energy? What even is that? So we'll get into it.
Yeah. So yeah,
please.
The big thing about this situation that is like important to kind of lay out is that this episode, we're like, I think like maybe like 10 episodes into Ancient Aliens at this point. And the Nazi stuff, it's like immediately they go to, first of all, Speaks to History Channel, which before it became Aliens was like Nazi channel. But then
that's true.
The fact is that like the myths that they are prepared, that they're like trying to push about the Nazis is that they were secretly actually super advanced and had really smart technology, and they were like way ahead of their time. And this is very pervasive. To give you a very clear idea of like the idea of like that Nazis were into esoteric, occult, high-tech stuff is huge. I just think of like Captain America and the laser Luger that I very much wanted to have at one point.
Yeah.
I always like my immediate thought when I was watching this episode was of all of the very funny technology that whoever made the designs for the first Captain America movie had to make, where like they had to make like high tech giant planes, but it also had to look like it was the 40s. So like they had like jet engines that also had propellers on them, and like And
they didn't know any better. They just thought that was how you should do it.
And the thing that I wanted the most, which was the Red Skull's laser Luger, which looked like a Luger pistol that shot lasers.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, that is what I'm thinking about now. Hydra is very much in that movie, very much was like, we are this experimental science mythological branch of Nazis until Red Skull gets all these powers and he's just like, I don't even care about Hitler anymore. I'm not even a Nazi. I'm a different thing now.
And that's like that's actually like a major thing in like this area of crankery. So we're obviously veering very close into where far right esoteric politics meets with like not like our kind of weird cultural fascination with Nazis. And one of the things that always comes up is like this idea that like, the Nazis were developing advanced technology, that they had discovered all of these like esoteric or occult powers that they were using, which two immediate things come to mind, which is one, why did they lose if they had like sci-fi technology? Two,
they didn't know how to wield it. It was too powerful for them.
Yeah. And two, where is that today? Because if that stuff was real, would we not have it? Because like the thing is, when Germany was defeated in World War II, going 0-2 on the world wars on that front, they had two opposing superpowers carve up the country, and each of them got like, different parts of the Nazis, like, technology programs, and they had diametrically opposed like, political orientations to each other. So there's not really much of a concept that like, if there was like a sci-fi technology in Nazi Germany that like, that we would get the Americans and the Soviets would both just agree to not use them against each other and also to keep them secret mutually.
Well, it was, S.H.I.E.L.D. swooped in and gathered up all of the cool Hydra technology and is keeping them. And S.H.I.E.L.D. is sort of like a world organization. They're not really beholden to any particular country. So, like, I think that's
all of its leadership is American, and all of their stuff is American, and all of their stuff looks like American military technology.
Yep. Don't think about it. Just don't ask questions. Again, we're asking too many questions.
Yeah. So, like, there's
the cardinal sin of this podcast is we ask too many questions.
There's so many. There's so many Marvel movies where like American guys, like where like American troops and stuff are in places, and I'm like, they're not supposed to be there. Like, why? Like there was like that. They were like raiding that like weapons depot or whatever in like somewhere in West Africa with what's his name, Andy Serkis on it, and I was like, did the Americans ask that like country if they could be there? like
Tristan, that is the entire plot of Civil War. They need oversight and regulation,
and then the Captain America is that it's bad. That oversight and regulation is bad.
It's complicated, but yeah. Anyway,
America,
we're not a movie podcast.
Yeah, we're not a movie podcast. The idea is that like the Cold War wouldn't have like exposed this. And the third thing I can also say is that there was the secret Nazi super program that had the secret technology, because the technology was rockets. And the US and Soviets both clamored to rehabilitate as many Nazis as they possibly could in order to jumpstart their rocket-free program.
Was it like cool space energy rockets?
It was fuel rockets that could make things go to
fueled by like the Tesseract energy, or like
the wonderful, the tesseract technology of liquid oxygen and kerosene.
Oh, okay. Cool.
The most famous, so like I know that the Soviets had a version of this as well, but the most famous one that I know about because I'm an American historian is Operation Paperclip, where the Americans took a bunch of high-ranking Nazi rocket scientists and were like, hey, war crimes? Didn't see any on this list. Want to come to America? Want free citizenship? Also want to be head of NASA? Do you just want to be head of NASA? You use slave labor to build rockets, and your brother directly saw like literal slave labor of people who were like in concentration camps build your rockets, and you want to be head of NASA? You want to just be
Yeah. Hey, look, we've been criticizing a little bit the politics of the Marvel movies, but this is also a big plot point in the second Captain America movie where they find out that S.H.I.E.L.D. is actually Hydra because they've just been folding in all these people who are obviously bad people, and they're just like, yeah, but we like your brain. Do you want to help us build stuff? And they're like, yeah, sure. I'll stop being evil. Just kidding. I'm going to keep being evil.
I'm going to be an evil computer person now. But yeah, like in one of my favorite shows right now, which will surprise literally nobody, For All Mankind, made by like D Space Nine and Battlestar Galactica alumnus Ron D. Moore, which kind of like outlines like my favorite idea of an alternate history, which is like, what if things were actually better than they are now?
I like that.
Yeah, because I don't know if have you heard of the show?
I do know of the show. I've heard really good things about the show. I've never seen it. The premise, I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because again, I've not seen it, but I believe the premise is what if the Soviets won the space race or something like that?
Basically, like the Soviets beat America to the moon. They land on the moon before America. And what that results in is that Richard Nixon, being Richard Nixon's like, I refuse to get shown up by the Soviets, so we're going to make the first moon base. And basically the space race just kind of keeps going harder. And it just like every season goes forward like decades. And it's like, this time we're going to be the first, we're racing to Mars in the 1990s and like, that kind of stuff.
That's fun.
But one of the sort of dream things that it gets through, and one of my favorites is that Werner von Braun, the Nazi that was tapped and had his past sanitized so that he could lead NASA's rocketry program. Actually, they have a whole thing where when Apollo 11 fails and they're like looking for someone to blame, they're like, well, the head of NASA is a Nazi. Why don't we just like throw him under the bus and he has to like testify in front of Congress about all the shit he knew. And like, I'm like, I would love, because Werner von Braun's one of those people who never had to face justice for the things that he was associated with. And the reason I'm laying all this out is because a lot of the times when we're going to talk about Nazi science, we are talking about like this war program that was based on some insane theories about the world and how science works that were completely not based in reality. They were based on like literal Nazi race science and just this concept of how like they would reject any physics that was developed by Jewish people. So they like ignored big parts of like how physics worked. And so they had a lot of like crazy sci-fi ideas, but none of them worked because they were based on this insane concept of how like the insane racial theories of the Nazis. And like the idea that the Nazis were like this like, technological superpower is based on them thinking up a bunch of stupid ideas that never worked. And like they poured a bunch of resources into developing these stupid ideas that never worked. And then the second part of it too is that they had this thing called the Wunderwaffen program, which I think we talked about in a previous episode, where
Wonder Weapon.
Yeah, when the Germans were starting to lose World War II, they started a program that was like to turn the war around. Let's like think of like some like sky like moonshot type things that could turn the war around for us. And some of them were very close to becoming a reality, like before rockets, like making a artillery using like controlled explosions to make an artillery shell that they could actually fire so far that it would go across the English Channel. But some were like, what if we were, because we basically lost the naval war at this point, what if we were able to turn battleship engines into tank engines, which would require making these absurdly large tanks?
So they just had a lot of imagination and not a lot of restraint
or scientific rigor.
Yeah, that as well. Yeah.
So like this is like the main thing. And so Viktor Schauberger is like one of the kind of people who falls into this milieu. So here's the thing here's who Victor Schauberger is. Victor Schauberger was this, I'm not going to say scientist for some reasons I'll get into later, but he's often portrayed as a scientist who had this very like this interesting had this interest in fluid dynamics, sort of physics of how fluids move, and spent a lot of time in nature. And he was very interested in things about like how water flows. He saw things like how does a trout in fast moving water, seemingly without much effort, stay completely still while like fast water is moving around it. And he thought that's like there's something profound in that. And
yeah, I mean, I would say right off the bat, I agree. Nature's cool. All right.
Yeah. So he developed a whole theory that like water has these like, there's like this power that you can generate from water that comes from creating vortices in a very specific fashion.
Okay.
And that you could use this, like he had this whole theory about implosions, that implosions can generate more energy than explosions, which turned out to be mostly wrong, but not entirely wrong, because that's actually like the sort of stuff behind nuclear bombs. But nuclear bombs use chain reactions and stuff too. But that's
gotcha.
But so he had this whole theory that water flow could be used to do things like generate energy from like low flow water, that you could make a water treatment system by using vortices and the idea of implosions to clean chemical water, like clean chemicals out of water, which I learned later. There's a Swedish company that actually took this principle and is using it not to the extent that he thought it could be used, but use it to an extent that like you could, and it's a clever idea that if you have like water that's full of crap and you put it through this like sort of this device that's designed to make it so that the water that flows through it starts to turn into a really fast vortex, like a tornado, that debris or anything that's like kind of like that you don't want in it will start to gravitate towards the center, and then you could just use a vacuum to suck that part out. And it's like a way to purify water without using chemicals.
Interesting.
It's still a work in progress, and I imagine that it's not going to be the only solution, but like that is an example of like one of Schauberger's ideas that sort of had fruit, but not in the way that he imagined it. And we'll get into that in a second.
Okay.
But he had a bunch of these like random inventions or ideas that revolved around this concept of his like obsession with fluid dynamics and vortices. But what he's mostly known for is something called repulsine, which is this, according to books that came out like 50 years after World War II, was this flying saucer-shaped aircraft that Schauberger was working with the Nazis to develop for the German Air Force that would use his vortex technologies to basically create a form of anti-gravity. And
okay. So when the claims say that he invented a flying saucer and anti-gravity, that was like a one in the same.
Yeah, they were like his idea of vortices led to a concept of anti-gravity. And the really sad part about this is that the guy they get to bring in to talk about this is Victor Schauberger's grandson.
Oh.
It's just like, and then I looked this guy up and he's like his job is primarily in the paper industry, and then his side hobby is promoting the legacy of his grandfather. And it's just like, this guy's like, it's just sad. It's just like, you can tell like it's the what, like I don't know. I mean, he is German, so the idea that like being excited about the paper industry might be more on brand. But like the fact that he's like trying to cling on to this legacy, I'd probably be like, oh, my grandfather invented anti-gravity, and it's like, or my grandfather, is just like, okay.
I was joking about the paper. Why would Germans be excited about paper? I was saying that as a joke.
Just because of the like, just like the joke about like industrial, like German industry, and like the fact that they like their favorite board games are like, Paper Mill Simulator or something like that.
Oh gosh.
You
remember when Anderson Cooper learned that one of his like great ancestors was like a slave owner, and he was like, wow, fuck that guy. Yeah. That feels like a sort of opposite thing to this situation, where this grandson is like, my grandpa was so cool. Just don't think about the Nazi stuff that he did though.
Yeah. We'll get into it. It's a little more complicated than that, but
okay. All right.
But yeah, let's get into like who actually Victor Schauberger really was. So Victor Schauberger, like many people who we call Germans, was born in Austria.
Okay.
And I love the description that I got was he was an Austrian forest caretaker, naturalist, philosopher, inventor, and pseudoscientist.
Great.
Noticed scientist not on there at all.
No. Not without the prefix pseudo in front of it.
No. He was born in 1885, so he was definitely part of like the sort of, his middle age by the time the war broke out. Would have put him in his like 60s. he came from a family of foresters and spent much of his childhood in the forest exploring natural phenomena. And his formal education is in forestry.
I mean, he's obviously, again, very excited about paper.
Yeah.
So
well, that's his grandson. His grandson got it later, right? The paper had to come down several ways.
But it runs in the genes.
Yeah. So he spent a lot of time, if you think about it, it's kind of like a betrayal, because he's like, we were about protecting forests, and now you're turning forests into paper?
I just wanted the forest to be in everyone's house in the form of paper.
Ah, there you
go. Grandpapa.
Most notably, there are things that in his formal education did not happen, like science, or going to school for, like, say, like a master's degree in engineering, or fluid dynamics, or physics, or any of those kinds of things that you might...
Interesting. Yeah. That sounds important if you're getting into the work of that field. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. But his first job was with the Austrian Forestry Commission, where he spent a lot of time doing water management, where he lived in, and he was a forest clerk for a place called Großschweinbach, which is in Lower Austria.
Right. Anytime you do German pronunciations, you always like pause and then you try to say it. I don't know if this is intentional or not, but you do try to say it as like loud as you can.
Großschweinbach. I'm just saying it the proper way, obviously. But one of the things that he did when he was like working in water management here is that he had a fascination with how it flowed. And this is where he noticed the fish and like this kind of stuff. And that's where he was like, there might be something to this. And he's like, I'm going to start inventing things.
That was his apple falling from a tree moment.
Yeah. And how, like, if you look at like the way water flows, there's vortices, there's spirals and other shapes. Like water doesn't flow straight. It flows in like curves and it makes like little vortexes and like all sorts of stuff.
It doesn't flow straight. It's gay water.
Yeah. All water is gay. This is true.
All water is
That's
gay.
why that's how the water turns the frogs gay, because all water is gay at the end of the day.
Because all water is gay. We cracked it. Yeah. Get Alex on the phone.
So his conclusion was, and this is part that doesn't make it into a lot of the more scientific descriptions, is that he basically came to the conclusion that water has to be a living organism that has its own energy and intelligence.
Okay. Hold on. I was like following pretty like closely, like, all right, yeah, water and the way it flows and vortices. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Oh, it's alive? No, I don't think water itself is alive.
We did establish earlier that water apparently fucks, but it isn't alive.
Yes. Yeah, that is true.
So like he came to this conclusion, and there's like a whole other thing that we'll probably have to get to at some point on this show, just knowing the trajectory of what we're going, where there's this whole other form of pseudoscience that believes that water can remember things and that it has its own like energy and power of its own. That's sort of like the theory behind like homeopathy and stuff, and like a weird what's his name, like Deepak Chopra type like quantum woo shit that we might have to deal with at some point.
I might end up cutting this out of the episode, so I'll leave a little marker here for me just in case. But I used to work at a place that I won't name, but they did something along the lines of covering Disney movies. And one of the theories they were trying to make a video about, and I don't know if they ever actually did, is this exact thing in relation to like Frozen, and how like in Frozen 2 there were like all those memories that were frozen in time with actual water and ice and things, and they were trying to bring up this exact theory. And I believe a couple of us in the office tried so hard to talk them off the ledge of bringing that idea up of like water has memories as like an actual scientific thing.
Oh no.
Just like, I don't think that's a thing. And so I don't know if they ever actually made that video, but we tried hard to talk them off of that ledge. Anyway.
Yeah, I've never seen Frozen 2, but every time I hear about it, I'm more like, that movie seems to really go some places.
It's all over the place, but we're not a movie podcast.
It's a movie that, it just seemed to get distracted, like us. So that is the main thing, is that he believed that water was alive, and that this kind of goes to the water being gay theory. He believed that if water was forced into a straight artificial channel, that its natural energy and life-giving properties would lose them. It would lose its natural energy and life-giving properties. So like,
that's conversion therapy on the water, forcing it to be straight. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Let the water be gay. There's nothing wrong with it.
Mm-hmm. And on top of that, he wanted to and this is like not even a bad thing, but he thought that like we should have a more harmonious relationship with nature, and he saw water as Earth's lifeblood, and tried to, like, his big thing was environmental damage. And from what I'm learning later, and I'll get into this later, but like a lot of his like interests seem to be about wanting to preserve nature. Like the fact that the things that he invented were like, some of his inventions that he pushed forward on his own without the Nazis' involvement were like a way to purify water that doesn't involve using a lot of energy, or a way to generate energy from water that doesn't require building a whole turbine, or like,
this is stuff I can get behind.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And the other thing too is that he had this whole system that he developed of different types of water. Like there was like water could be young or old, and like that had like, it had energy. So like he was like, water that is like distilled or sterile is like immature, or it's like juvenile, and you have to ripen water by like having it go through like a spring in a forest in order to be like that water is better at doing things than like the other ones. So like again, this just shows like not to like, like knock the guy too hard, but like this is exactly like, this is the mentality that he has about why water does what it does, that then he's approaching to fluid dynamics and physics and his inventions, which is like,
it's sort of mixing to like,
he's not off to a good start.
Fluid dynamics and stuff is a very scientific thing, whereas aging like the water is a living thing that can be old or young, sort of not based in that same sort of science. So it's complicated, I would say.
Yeah, exactly. So that was his thing. After the war, he ended up going to the US for a while, but he didn't really like his experience there, so he ended up going back to Austria at a certain point. He ended up dying in 1958. Kind of disappointed. The thing is that it's really hard to tell, because basically starting at around World War II, his biography gets very, very vague, and you don't really learn much until like he just like it just gets written down that he died in the 50s. So this was the part where like this was going to start off as a biography episode, but then I got kind of sidetracked for several hours, because it's like his trail very much goes cold, like in like the 30s, and then doesn't show up again until after the war.
Mysterious. What happened between the 30s and the 50s?
Yeah, for real. So what I'm going to say is that there are some more speculative, or at least like not fully verified ideas about what his time was like in the Nazi regime. And so I'm just going to preface this, that this is a mix of like stuff being said by like relatives of his, or by people who might have made shit up, or things that are not like nothing based out of like verified history. So I would take this with a giant mountain of salt, and it's going to be like contradictory and inconsistent, because this is just a list of things people have said about what his time in the Nazi regime was like, basically.
Perfect.
Okay.
It's enough salt to make sauerkraut. I've made sauerkraut before. That's my second sauerkraut joke. You need cabbage and salt. That's all you need.
And I'm a big sourdough guy. I make sourdough. I have a starter that I have been taking care of for years.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know.
Yeah. Actually, those Germans that my neighbors, they're the ones who gave it to me. His name is Dwayne, or son of Dwayne, I guess.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the sourdough.
So anyways, this is the bit about his experience with the Nazis. So apparently he had, and like, this is the part, like, I'm not going to be too, like, I mean, in retrospect, we all should have been harder on this, but he had a positive relationship with the Nazi regime when they took over Austria, or even before that, but like, keep in mind that like, there was a lot of people who did, because they either didn't appreciate how bad or how far this shit was going to go, or like didn't get the full picture, because the Nazis weren't exactly forthcoming with everything that they wanted to do all the time. But even so, the fact that they still campaigned on like open anti-Semitism does mean that like you're a little bit not off the hook on this. But I guess that according to this, Schauberger had this idea, like he liked the idea, because one of the things that the Nazis did do, and that they were kind of like novel for doing, is that, and this kind of comes of the fact that that the Nazi party came out of like Romanticism, the sort of romantic movement, and which sort of led to like the birth of nations and nationalism, which led to like the Nazi party, that they had this sort of romanticization of things like nature. And so the Nazis were like one of the first parties to have like actual actual like environmental protection laws.
Well, Schauberger did like the trees.
Yeah, and that's that's apparently what attracted him to the party. There's a lot, like the Nazis also put in like some of the first anti-smoking laws and like first public health type things. Like it's just like part of the shit that you just kind of have to eat when you're talking about this stuff.
Yeah, broken clock, right?
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, they all did it because they wanted to create a pure and strong German nation that would defeat the lesser races in the great struggle for survival and shit. So
it wasn't.
It's not like they did it for good. It's not like they did it because they like genuinely love the earth or anything.
No. Yikes.
Yeah. But because he was attracted to it, he eventually was reportedly appointed as an advisor to address water management issues in the Third Reich. And then things get very controversial and debatable because, and this is like where Ancient Aliens would step in, they would say that during World War II, he then somehow got pulled into aviation research where he was working on these experimental flying discs because the Nazis like thought that his vortices were like a sort of anti-gravity thing. And then they pulled him in to build a flying machine based on these principles that he had like written about.
Huh. So it wasn't necessarily his idea. They were just like, you're doing some interesting stuff with fluid dynamics. Can you make a little spaceship?
Theoretically, at least that is what several of his family members who seem to be very intent on talking about how much of an arm's length he kept himself from the Nazi regime.
I see. Because
they're like,
I see.
No,
That's
you see, he
pinch of salt again.
He joined the Nazi regime because he liked their environmental policy, and he got. His ideas were so brilliant that they forced him into research on the war effort. And like,
it was not his idea at all. He didn't even want to be there.
Yeah.
He complained the whole time. He said, "Oh, these Nazis, am I right?" Ugh.
Yeah. And this happens a lot when we're talking about people trying to like rehabilitate people who were involved with the Nazi regime years later, is that like, oh, like everyone had to be part of the Nazi regime back then if you wanted to get anywhere. And like, if like he had to, they would have killed him if he didn't volunteer to join up and like, like all that kind of stuff. So the legend goes is that he was then forced to, against his will, be like pushed into aviation research where he would be forced to work on this anti-gravity device that then, depending upon how cranky you want to go, either worked or didn't work. And there's like, stories that he like met with Hitler at a certain point because Hitler was fascinated with his ideas and like blah, blah, blah. Like, oh, this is just like,
but he definitely didn't like the Nazis. He just met with Hitler because it was like a work thing. It was a business thing. It wasn't necessarily because it was like a
exactly.
He didn't like the Nazis.
And that he like he became disillusioned with the Nazis after his they pushed his like he had ideas about free energy and water purification, and they wanted to turn it into a weapon for war, and they didn't like that. And so like I can see the myth making already.
Do we know if his relatives, did they think his flying machine worked?
It does.
His anti-gravity thing?
I'd have to like look at the episode again because they had his grandson talking about him, but also it's very easy for, because Ancient Aliens does a lot where they get somebody who doesn't believe in the crankery, but selectively edits them so that it looks like they do.
Edit around it. Yeah.
But I think he has shown up on several episodes of Ancient Aliens, so my guess is that if he doesn't believe it,
he knows what it's about.
Yeah, he's not uncomfortable with people thinking that he does, I guess.
Right. He's like, I'm not going to say that my grandpa invented anti-gravity flying saucer, but if other people say it's the David Childers
other people
thing.
say that he invented anti-gravity. I don't say it, but
it is exactly David
I say
Childers.
that other people say this.
I'm not saying. Yeah, other people have said it, and that's cool with me.
Yeah, that's sort of the bit. But that and so like that's he like I didn't like the Nazis because the military stuff, and I'm like okay, this is sort of like this happened with Werner von Braun as well, where it's like
sure,
like there's like everyone starts becoming a freaking like history scholar and splitting hairs because they had to determine to what extent he understood that the rockets that he was designing were literally being built by slaves. And they're like, he couldn't have known. He wouldn't have talked to people who would have seen this happening, like his brother. So the device that he reportedly built was something called the repulsine.
The repulsine.
Yeah, that would shape like a flying saucer. And Ancient Aliens goes as far as to slightly imply, like there's sort of two contradictory realities that they say in the same thing, that Schauberger was the person behind it, or that it was a reverse engineering of alien technology, or some combination of the two. Like the story they try to set up is that like a UFO, that I'll probably talk about this in a different episode. There was reportedly a UFO crash in Freiburg about 2 years before the Nazis took over the German government, and that their theory is that they used this technology to reverse engineer and invent a bunch of stuff that led to like the jet engine and like all other things that were kind of like invented during the Nazi regime. But this was, and so like they brought in Schauberger maybe because he was the only person who would have understood the sort of anti-gravity fluid dynamics of the UFOs. They didn't need an engineer; they needed someone who understood fluids.
They needed a guy who was an ally to the gay water.
Yeah. Oh God. So that's the idea, is that this he thought there's this idea that this vortex could generate this powerful implosion, this like kind of sucking force that just by forcing like fluids to flow a certain way would create a vortex that would then create like a sort of energy source that would push in a direction. That's his idea. And that it had propulsion jets just for directional control, but that this was the real way that it like hovered. And what he called an implosion-based propulsion system. The other thing, too, that made researching this really hard is that he called a lot of things names that then years later would become real things that were not based on his ideas, but were based on that used similar words. Like there was one like his trout turbine that he tried to make. Was also called an impulse turbine, which is a term for a real turbine that we use today, where it uses like a nozzle, so it like concentrates the pressure of water to shoot water at the turbine blades to move it. So,
but it's not at all connected to the thing that he
was thinking of now.
Right. Gotcha. That makes it complicated.
Yeah, and so like this is why, and also the fact that, and I kind of mentioned this before we started recording, but like a lot of the writing about Schauberger, because there's actually not a lot of like, he didn't make any real contributions to physics or to engineering, but a lot of cranks who call themselves engineers and physicists have both, one, really like his ideas, and two, have very good SEO agents working for their websites.
There you go.
So it's really hard to kind of suss out like what is an actual Schauberger contribution to engineering versus another invention that happened later that happened to have the same name that he gave it, or how much of this is like an actual contribution to power generation or anything like, or turbine generation, versus something that a website like livingwater.ca tries to sell.
Well, all right. I feel like I'm learning a lot about this guy, but I kind of do want to know more about this, the scientific stuff, anti-gravity, free energy, all that good stuff. Is there any way we could get into that a little bit?
Oh, we definitely will. But first,
okay.
Do you know about any services or products that we should be getting or speaking about?
Potentially. Actually, let me see. Let me check. And I got a bag here with some products and service. Would you want to open that real quick?
Yeah, you want to like crack it? You want to do a little bit of product and service?
Just want to get a little product and service in between the. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Good stuff. I don't know about
good
you,
products.
I got a lot more. I got a lot more energy.
That
going
high tier pure Colombian product.
Or service. We don't know.
Gosh, need some more of that. It's been 10 minutes. Anyways, so the two major lines of crankery, and I'm very sad that we couldn't get my friend Rob McDougall, who's been on this show before, to come on for this, because this is like 150% his jam, is two bits. Anti-gravity and free energy machines, which are part of pseudo-engineering nonsense, has a much deeper history in both of them. Yeah.
I feel like any sort of pseudoscience stuff always has to bring up at least these two things. Is anti-gravity, free energy. I don't even know what free energy is, and I'm sure we'll get into it.
It's because it isn't.
That would explain a lot, actually.
It's because it's literally physically impossible. Let's start with anti-gravity, though. So
start with anti-gravity.
History has long been filled with engineers trying to undo the effect of gravity.
Okay.
You might see it in the, airplanes, helicopters, but there have been other ones because, like, one of the things that people have always tried to, create is some sort of force or thing that would just undo the pull of gravity so that you do not need to have like huge amounts of power or something like that to push to basically undo the repulsion of or the thing of gravity. And if you could figure that out, that'd be great, because
non-gravity.
The reason why sending stuff to space costs $10,000 a kilogram or something like that is because you need to for every kilogram you put on a rocket, you have to have a ton of fuel to move it into orbit, right? So
the Earth is greedy and it wants to keep things here.
Yeah, it's the biggest problem in science. We would be on Mars right now if it wasn't for the fafact that it's prohibitively expensive to send shit to space.
Gravity.
So if you're ever curious about why people are intent on those mythological inventions like a space elevator or some sort of a Gauss rifle gun that would shoot magnetically propel something into space or something like that. It's all to try and find more efficient ways to overcome this issue.
So it's been going on for a while.
Yeah. So the first one I could find actually comes to the 1920s, which was by a guy named Thomas Townsend Brown, who tried to develop this anti-gravity propulsion technique that used electric fields in what he called electrogravitics.
Okay.
Very fun thing to say. And dedicated most of his life to
electrogravitics.
Yeah. He spent most of his life trying to promote this, and to the point where there was some in the 1950s when, the U.S. military was, going to throw money at anything. He did actually get some actual research grant money to explore electrogravitic technology, but then had a bunch of issues that he couldn't explain, and during that period, he all the DARPA money it wasn't going anywhere, and he stopped getting more and more money, and also there's the fact that we'll probably do a whole episode on this, that we mentioned it before, but there was also this theoretical anti-gravity device the Germans made during World War II called Die Glocke, or the bell.
Yes, I've heard of the bell. Yeah, that's a pretty famous one.
And now there's also a new sort of push to make anti-gravity called quantum electrodynamics. But
I love in modern science, if you want to just add quantum in front of everything and it'll sound I don't know, maybe that could be the answer.
Yeah.
It's quantum. We don't know.
There was NASA was trying to push for a really long time to make this propulsion that works by electricity that you can use kind of to make really, really light things float. But even so, it's not working. The main problem with that is that they don't even know how it works. It just kind of works, and they don't exactly know why. And they're
like magnets.
Yeah. But again, this is a thing that has been trying to be invented over and over again. And many engineers, I remember there was a recent conspiracy theory that there was this Chinese scientist who invented this is the conspiracy theory, that she had was working on a patent in the US on trying to make this form of anti-gravity, and then the sort of Chinese secret police or whatever came to America and kidnapped her, and she all of a sudden had to move back to China and never got seen again. And it's okay,
sure.
Just have some xenophobic angles to it as well, right? The evil Chinas are coming for us or whatever. But there is no evidence that there is anything as anti-gravity, and every single attempt to create it has been revealed to be pseudoscience. And anytime there's anything that even kind of comes close to it, like that sort of thing I mentioned about that NASA's playing around with, it's not anti-gravity, it's just propulsion. It's not undoing gravity, it's just lifting. It's just source of lift.
I was going to ask, because I didn't know if this would be a question for previous guest Isaac Arthur, but is anti-gravity even a thing, or is it just all propulsion?
Yeah, it does seem like to just be, because the thing is, gravity, at the end of the day, gravity is the result that the fabric of the universe, space-time.
Yeah, space-time.
Isn't flat. It curves. And that heavier things, kind of if you dropped a bowling ball in the center of your bed, will cause a sort of dent around it. And gravity is just us sort of moving, being affected by those things.
By the pull of the fabric of space-time from bigger objects. massive objects, I should say.
Which I'm not a theoretical physicist by any stretch of the imagination, but you could imagine that undoing that is going to require technology that we are nowhere close to understanding how to do. And if we could, the thing is that if we could find ways to like make anti-gravity or repel gravity, a bunch of stuff that we think is physically impossible all of a sudden starts to become very possible, like time travel and weird shit like that. So
it's only a matter of time, only a matter of space-time.
I think the thing that Isaac Arthur said on our show once that was like, if you could just let like all the theories of like faster than light travel or time travel are like, if you could let us have one impossible thing, we can figure this out.
Yeah.
You know?
Like it works on math, it works on paper, but then you translate it to real life and it's like, you do need an impossible thing.
Yeah. If we can just figure out one of the impossible things, we'd be fine. The other is free energy machines. Speaking of things that don't work.
All right. You got to explain free energy to me. I've heard this term for my entire life and I've never understood what this meant.
Okay. So this has actually been going on for like ever. Like as soon as like we have been trying to find ways to like replace human labor with energy for forever. Like, you know, like even if you think about it, even things like animals pulling carts is a form of like trying to harness non-human energy, or like water mills that are being used to grind, you know, flour, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But in more recent days, it's about trying to find ways to make energy from something that basically just make energy from nothing.
Make energy from nothing.
Yeah. So like the idea that these are usually called things like perpetual motion machines, or another term that these are used for.
Yes.
The idea is that they are a device that can run indefinitely without any external energy source, which if you know anything about physics, is that there are two things that are called laws of thermodynamics, which are part of the laws on like what we know about how the universe functions. And there are two that are really important for understanding these sort of free energy machines. One,
hit me with them.
The first law, which is that energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be moved around. Already free energy seems to be not a thing because you can't really create energy.
You can't create it but what if I could get it from nothing?
Yeah.
Is that anything? Is that anything?
There's like some theories about like 0 point energy, but then even then it's like what even is like harvesting energy from quantum foam or something. But then you're getting into physics that
it's a quantum thing. Just throw quantum in front of it and everything opens up and it's like, I don't know, could be.
At the extremely small level. And keep in mind, this is like almost like I'm like veering heavily. We're like in the heavy orange zone of like things that's going to have to be a corrections thing in the future. But there is this idea that of the quantum foam, which is that at the very smallest of levels, the universe seems to have like almost pixels rather than like a discrete thing. Like, you know, objects can't move from A to B like this, but like moves like just disappears from A and appears at B. And at like a certain small enough level, you kind of that movement between those 2 points doesn't happen anymore. And it's just like, it just disappears from one, like it teleports to the other. Like quantum teleportation is trying to extend the distance that you can do that. And it's weird. And it's not a thing we'd like completely comprehend. But one of the things that people have talked about is like the idea of quantum foam, which is that like at this small level, there's kind of some shit that just keeps like coming in and out of existence and we don't exactly know how it works, it's probably going to be a natural process that we just don't have the sort of tools to really understand how it works, because everything else that we have ever studied in physics shows that you can't just make something from nothing. It's just, and so we'll probably find out something about the actual physics on how the quantum foam works, but it has led to like these ideas of like 0 point energy or something like that can harvest energy from the quantum foam and whatnot. But that is
all right,
like,
so that's
still like,
but that's one law.
Yeah. The second being is that heat can't move from a lower temperature place to a higher temperature place. This is what's called entropy. And this is the sort of the kind of law that, to some interpretations of it, is the reason why time moves forward and not backwards, which is just the idea that I guess like the best way to think about it intuitively would be to imagine like if I had like a canister full of gas, right? And I put it in like a room and I punctured it. There's no point in which the gas would go back into the canister because the gas would always fill into the room kind of. And on like a thing about physics is like the idea is that entropy always goes up. Order always sort of moves towards disorder. And that if you want to turn disorder into order, you have to use energy to do so.
Right.
And so that means that like, you know, like things are always dispersing, energy is always dispersing. And that has been true since like, you know, the point of the maximal order was like, you know, that single point when all of the universe was like, you know, at the Big Bang, right? And that's why like they kind of say that before the Big Bang, time isn't really a useful concept because there was no things did not change. So therefore, the concept of like time, if you think about it, time is the process of things going through entropy and expanding. And this is why the kind of current model of physics is that in like trillions and trillions of years, the energy of the universe is going to be so spread out that the average temperature of the universe is going to be indistinguishable from being, or almost indistinguishable from being absolute zero, which is called like the heat death of the universe. So like,
and that's when we're in the end game.
Yeah, it's so far in the future. That's like when like even the last black holes start burning out because of like Hawking radiation and shit. So like it's like trillions of years in the future, like multiple millions of lifetimes of the universe already in the future.
Yeah, I don't have to worry about that then.
Yeah, when every star dies, like, humans will be long gone by then.
But Grey's Anatomy will keep going.
Season 8 trillion is amazing.
Season 8 trillion of Grey's Anatomy. I cannot believe Richard is still there. He's the only OG left.
Man, when that show ends, it's going to be like an event, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like shows like that always kind of go out with a whimper, not a bang, but either way.
For sure.
But yeah, so like this is like the sort of a fact. These are like facts of the universe. Like every observation we've ever made in physics says these things are laws. Like a law is not a theory. It's not a hypothesis. It has been demonstrated so often over and over and over again that it is like inviolable. We have never seen anything break these rules.
Yes. They are firmly planted in our existence.
Yeah. Nevertheless, people have been claiming to make free energy devices forever, including people like Harry Perigo, who claimed in the 19-teens and 20s to have one, but it was a hoax. I can't. I feel like Rob, my buddy Rob, would be sad if I didn't also mention the Keeley motor, which was a attempt to make a free energy machine using magnets, and very often a lot of perpetual energy machines or perpetual motion machines today are just off-center wheels with magnets, which are not free energy machines.
I've heard the saying that the hardest part about building a perpetual motion machine is finding where to hide the battery.
That is true. That's very true. There's also like this idea that like other scientists have gotten into this. Nikola Tesla had this whole concept of wireless energy, which was then, appropriated by ancient aliens. We talked about this with like the pyramids being a power reactor. This sort of they sort of like played on this idea of wireless transmission of electrical power, which Tesla's idea was one of those things that's like he was wrong, but like. And we'll kind of get into this with Schauberger too. He was wrong, but then like the principle was not as wrong as we thought. And like now in more recent times, we're just being able to play around with some of the ideas, like the fact that you have an iPhone. My phone has this too. The fact that like we have wireless charging is kind of
I'm doing it right now.
Wireless charging, which is made by using like magnet induction stuff.
Coils. Yeah.
That was sort of the principle that Nikola Tesla was thinking of, but he thought that you could like broadcast like energy like radio.
Yeah, like a big Wi-Fi network, but for electricity and power and things.
And even that's not wrong, because that is at its core what radio is. And if you, like radio is like broadcasting electromagnetic waves and then having something like a quartz crystal that can that resonates at the frequency that you're going with, and like different radio frequencies are like tuning it to different frequencies. And so like there has been like some theories that you could like power something by shooting it with radio waves and then having that like vibration be harnessed as energy. There's there's some theories that you could make like really low power sensors work with that.
Yes.
But like, and even some ideas of like power, like wireless power transmission for like, sort of like solar power that's in space. How do you beam that energy down to the planet? And usually it uses microwaves because you can pack a lot more energy into the space for that. Yeah. But again, there's a lot of logistical issues like dispersing in the air and stuff. But like the principle is not impossible.
Yeah. If there's anything to take away, it's that you can charge your phone by putting it in the microwave. That's something that we want you to walk away with from this episode is go ahead, throw your phone in the microwave, put it on. I would say maybe like
3 minutes on high.
3 minutes on high sounds perfect.
Just don't use the popcorn button.
Don't use the popcorn button. That will make you tweet something racist. I can't explain why. You will get canceled if you use the popcorn button.
I do love that, like, the popcorn button has always, it's just a trap. There is no use, it exists for nothing else than to be a trap. Because, like, every popcorn thing says, don't use the popcorn button.
Yeah, if you want more information about the popcorn button, this is a very rare
There's a technology connection, right?
Technology Connections did a video about popcorn
Technology
buttons
Connections
on
is
microwaves.
such a good YouTube channel.
Extremely good YouTube channel.
When they made the one that said that that brown isn't a color, like, my brain was like,
I haven't
broken
watched
for
that
years.
one.
Brown isn't a color. It's dirty orange. Anyways,
yeah.
But yeah, so like,
Anyway.
so free energy, like, obviously, if you could figure out free energy, you would redefine physics, but you would also, like, energy is like the big choke point of our civilization, right? Like, to the point where, like, sometimes we define the advancement of a civilization by how much energy they can harness. So many people have done this over the years, and there's a big allure, there's a lot of big thing, but that is like another thing. But also, on Schauberger's thing, there is like the idea that one of his like primary inspirations was biomimicry, right? Like looking at how animals do things and trying to build something that does that. And that
the trout in the water. Yeah.
And in his own way, even though he had no idea about why these things worked, and like, he had a lot of issues, that was ahead of its time. And we have gotten a lot of very interesting inventions by looking at how the animal kingdom have evolved, or how animals and plants have evolved solutions to things, and making things in that sort of vein. And so he wasn't.
I've heard for years that we're still trying to figure out how to make synthetic like spider web, because it has really interesting properties that is hard to make in a lab, but spiders can just do it.
Yeah.
So
there was a point when we were trying to genetically engineer goats so that they made spider silk in their milk.
Oh my God, I remember this.
Yeah, the spider goats.
Well, don't say we. I wasn't a part of that.
We were just having all of these goats get bitten by radioactive spiders, but they just kept turning into superheroes, and they
just kept wanting to fight crime. We just wanted their silk milk. And that's all we wanted.
And for everyone we created, we accidentally killed a sheep Stacy or something like that. And
yeah, it was a canon event. It had to happen.
God, that's what Goat Simulator is. Okay.
Yeah.
Goat Simulator is basically Goat Spider-Man. The other thing too is that his ideas, despite the fact that like they were not based on him like actually understanding physics, have like again, kind of with like Tesla's wireless power, has been revisited in a way by like people who do know what they're doing, but like decades later and to some interesting effect. Like one of the big ones I came across was something called Vortex Hydro. There was another company too that was based out of Sweden that is using the idea of his like vortex thing of like how vortices move things towards center to actually get debris out of water, but
suction stuff out.
Another is a company called Vortex Hydro, which is a Michigan company that's trying to find a way to make sort of get hydrodynamic, like try to get ways to get energy from water that doesn't involve building these very disruptive hydroelectric dams and stuff like that. And they had this idea of like, you make this sort of, from like I can like research about it, you make this kind of box that does encourage water to move in a sort of spiral-like fashion. And through that sort of thing, you can kind of take the natural flow of water, even if that flow is very slow, and harness that kinetic power and turn it into usable energy. It'd be a way to like have like, it wouldn't generate a lot of energy, but it would be a way to generate some energy from water, from a source that we normally could get nothing from.
Okay.
Which is very interesting. And it
is.
Yeah. And it's called the major thing is called the Vivace converter, which is the device they use that uses vortex-induced vibrations to generate energy. So it's like a hydroelectric energy thing that does not use power, but uses like cylinder movements, and it can operate in water that moves as slow as 2 to 4 knots. Like really, really slow flowing water can be used to generate some power, which is again, like in our race to, again, as we're scrambling to find sources of energy, trying to find ways to get energy from the environment that is renewable. And this could be one of the many ways that we solve this. And it's not bullshit. Like it got funding from the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, and has a permit from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to try putting some studies in the St. Clair River. So it's like, it's still like, whether or not it's going to work is a part of ongoing conversion, because the main problem is that it's not very efficient. Like it doesn't make a lot of energy. It makes very little energy. But if the technology can work, that would be another source of energy. And it's based on this sort of like vortex idea that Schauberger had.
Interesting.
And
well, you mean that he stole from a fish?
They stole from a fish. Yeah. Trout really should be credited for this.
Yeah. Troutberger.
trout burger. Yeah. Sounds tasty.
That actually sounds good. I'm hungry now.
Yeah. So the thing is that like the part where Tristan makes you sad was a little bit kind of like is another part of like
we need a stinger for this part. I don't have a sound effect for the one where Tristan makes you sad. Beans. Let me see. Oh, I got this. Here. How about you can decide between these two.
Okay. Okay.
Versus. So sort of like sad brass instruments.
Yeah, there's sort of there's sort of like an irreverence to it I appreciate, but
So this is the part where Tristan makes you sad and it goes like this.
I think that works. That works well. Okay. But like the thing though, when I was researching this, even before I found the connections in the research, my immediate thought was this sounds like Nikola Tesla. This is a guy who might have had some interesting ideas. I think Nikola Tesla did more actual inventions because he basically is like the person who invented alternating current and like transformers and like the critical infrastructure.
Human cloning of Hugh Jackman.
What, is that from? Was that Prestige?
It's from the Prestige. Yes.
I have not seen it.
Good job.
But I just assumed. But yeah, like Nikola Tesla, like he had real ideas that did work. Like he invented actual shit that is like critical to the way our electricity infrastructure works today. He also, and more so when he was starting to become like later in life when he was getting broke and stuff, had a bunch of really crank ideas like the sort of wireless power beamed across the world or his death ray or like he had a lot of theories about resonant frequencies and stuff like that were either bullshit, like they didn't work, or like they were based on like a theory of physics that we were nowhere close to being able to harness in any useful way. And now, like years and years and years later, people are returning to the idea, not that like Tesla would have known how to actually do this, but like the principle is being revisited, but with like modern technology to be able to try and do things like wireless power or not death rays. I don't think there's any death rays yet, but
no, I don't think anyone's doing death rays.
No. But the other case is that I think with Schauberger is much less accomplished. He did not invent anything that actually had a use. But he had these like he was interested in concepts that other real scientists could pick up later, like about studying vortices as a source of energy or using like nature as inspiration for invention. And those are it's kind of like he's it's a complicated historical figure because it's hard to really figure out whether he actually inspired this or if he just had these ideas kind of before they would get to maturation in the rest of the world, which would then say he was ahead of his time. And then also there's a lot of big question marks about his relationship with the Nazi regime. And just like overall, like many historical figures, extremely complicated. And there's a lot more questions than answers. But in those kinds of spaces where there's a lot more questions than answers, that's where the cranks can show up and start to say like, well, actually Schauberger invented a flying machine that was just far too cool, so it never saw the light of day, and that the Nazis didn't use this awesome technology to do anything like win World War II with it or something like that.
Yeah.
Do you think if the Nazis had free energy or anti-gravity devices that they might have been able to really get some air superiority, like, not being dependent on gasoline for your airplanes might have been pretty useful in the war?
I mean, Red Skull probably was doing some of that.
He had the Tesseract, though. That's different.
That's a different thing.
That's another free energy machine.
That's another free energy machine, potentially powered by one of the 6 stones that created the universe. Or
what powers those stones?
I can't remember the lore.
I don't know.
Magic or different energy from different universes. I don't know. I can't keep up with Marvel anymore.
I will say I was not expecting Echo to veer into pure magic at a certain point. So
did it? I still haven't watched it. It's
good.
to.
It's really good. It just it took a supernatural turn that I wasn't expecting. Anyways, that's Viktor Schauberger. Again,
that's Victor,
a guy with not a lot of details about his life that are verified or anything, but it opened up a lot of interesting boxes that will probably end up being topics of their own episodes in the future.
Absolutely.
There's got to be an Ancient Aliens episode that has a bunch of stuff on Nikola Tesla. So we're going to have to do the Tesla episode at some point.
100%. And of course, we got to do the bell. We got to do, I'm sure there's so many other things to explore in here. And is this part one of a
Yeah.
Not
this is the first
Aliens and Third Reich.
This is the first part of the Aliens and the Third Reich. That's why I did the whole thing about we're going to be.
So we're coming back to this.
I imagine Tiklaka is coming sooner rather than later.
All right. Stay tuned for next week, where we'll dive into more of this. And a really great place where you can stay up to date on all of our goings on here is Probs Not Aliens on Twitter and Blue Sky. That's where we have updates of stuff, and sometimes we tweet pictures of the things that we talked about. In fact, if you look up pictures of Viktor Schauberger, Tristan made this joke before we were recording, he looks like a guy who is absolutely named Viktor Schauberger.
Yeah.
So we'll tweet those out over on Twitter and Blue Sky. Again, that's at Probs Not Aliens.
Yeah.
Tristan, do you have a Blue Sky code for people?
So BSKY-social-JNO7F-2FW3R, all lowercase.
All lowercase. So help me if you do any capitals in there, I will cry. Tristan, where can people find more of your stuff that you do online outside of this podcast?
I have a YouTube channel called Step Back, which you can find at stepbackhistory.com, or Step Back on Nebula. It is it's a channel where I talk about about history and why it's important for understanding things going on in the world. I just made a 2-hour video about Gaza, and it went through my schedule like a boar going through an anaconda, I lost many nights of sleep getting this thing
can imagine.
passed, but I'm on the other side of it like today.
Excellent.
And Scott, if I wanted to know where Sabretooth was during Logan, where would I need to go?
My most popular video, I think, ever. That is full of technical errors because I was just rushing to get it out. You can go to my YouTube channel called Nerdsync, NERDSYNC. I'm sure that video will be out of date by the time Deadpool 3 comes out, and they probably retcon Sabretooth or what have you. So
what continuity
look forward
is
to that?
What continuity is he even in at this point?
No,
what is that?
I have no idea.
X-Men is so fucked in what continuity is going on at the moment. It's like,
who can say?
Yeah.
That's where I make videos about nerdy stuff, comics and movies and cartoons. And I know I've been saying this for months. I'm still working on one about licensed cookbooks, but I promise it'll be very interesting and funny and sad. I learned how to make licensed cookbooks into a thing that makes you sad.
You're learning too much from me.
I'm learning too much from Tristan. You can get new episodes of this podcast early by going to nebula.tv/probablynotaliens. So go check that out if you want even more Nazi stuff. There's
a lot. I feel like the part where Tristan makes you sad could almost just be like the part where I found the Nazis while researching.
Yep. So go over there, and it also supports the show. It really does help us out, as well as reviews of the show. People who write reviews on Apple Podcasts and leave comments on YouTube or feedback on Spotify. All that stuff really does help. It makes it so people who are finding the show can be like, oh, there's an active audience. There's new reviews coming in. That's great. So really does help. Mm-hmm. And also telling your friends, telling your German neighbors about the show to listen. I'm sure they would appreciate it and get a kick out of the way we very professionally pronounced all of the German words and didn't make jokes about it at all. I think they'd like that, right? And a really simple place you can send people, all of your friends and German neighbors, is probsnotaliens.com. It's got links to everywhere where you can listen to the show. But that is it. So until next time, my name is Scott Nicewander.
I'm Tristan Johnson, and the truth is out there. Wahrscheinlich.
A little German.
Voraussichtlich. Yep, one of those. Probably none of them.
Probably none of them.